Hello again, this is Mark Nedgemer from Newsweek.com. I may be one of the suckers that got caught up in this ENDP stock uh, without doing enough research. I'm currently holding 81,000 shares. I don't know what tomorrow is going to be like. What I've just learned is that ENDO has a pretty big bond payment due tomorrow, and if they don't make the bond payment, within weeks, they'll probably file for bankruptcy. Uh, what does this mean for us? I think we better go through this article that I just picked up on that came out about 2 hours ago, actually 7:46 p.m. Eastern Time. It says drug maker Endo faces bond decision as creditors mold bankruptcy. Creditors disagree on how to resolve the drug maker's debt woes. Unresolved opioid lawsuits hang over restructuring talks. You can find this by typing into the internet Bloomberg ENDO. Anyway, this is by Stephen Church, Rachel Butt, and Eliza Ronalds Hannon. ENDO International PLC, the latest drug maker inspired by opioid lawsuits, must decide whether to skip more than $90 million in interest payments as it contemplates a potential bankruptcy filing. Contemplates. The company has been discussing its options with creditor groups that have conflicting views over its best path for dealing with lawsuits over its role in Americans' opioid epidemic, a mounting debt load, and a dimmed outlook for its best-selling drug. Now, I want to point out that, like you, I use the stock boards and I read about the company before I bought the stock on the stock boards. But how inaccurate that stuff is unbelievable, because what I heard is that there was a Supreme Court passed a law that would make it more difficult for them to put this company out of business. Obviously, that was completely false information and probably planted on the stock boards to get people like you and I to buy the stock, and we lose our money. Anyway, the company's senior lenders have advocated for a bankruptcy filing and want the company to skip upcoming interest payments to preserve cash, according to people with knowledge of the talks. Now, these are the people, the senior lenders. These are the bigger lenders. The company's senior lenders have advocated for a bankruptcy filing and want the company to skip upcoming interest payments to preserve cash, according to the people with knowledge of the talks. Endo's lower-ranking creditors, the ones that would collect the bulk of the interest due Thursday and at the end of July, are pressing options that would allow the drug maker to restructure outside of court. Given vastly reduced earnings expectations following competition to its top drug, Vasostrict, Endo may be looking hard at foregoing its nearly $40 million bond payment due Thursday as the value of the company declines, said Bloomberg Intelligence credit analyst Mike Holland. To the dismay of vocal junior bondholders, it appears likely secured lenders and secured bondholders will be in a position to drive a possible restructuring process, he said. Representatives of Endo did not return calls and emails seeking comment. Restructuring tactic. Distressed companies, now this is a sidebar, so to speak. Restructuring tactic. Distressed companies typically quit making interest payments on unsecured bonds just before filing for bankruptcy, a well-known restructuring tactic that conserves cash and is often a sign that a Chapter 11 filing is coming within weeks. Endo has a payment due on June 30th to holders of 6% bonds maturing in 2028. At the end of July, the company is scheduled to pay $55 million more in interest to various other creditors, according to data collected by Bloomberg. Senior lenders have argued that advantages of skipping the interest payments and filing for bankruptcy, according to people familiar with the talks. Endo and lenders have been trading proposals as they try to come to deal, the people said. The 6% unsecured notes due 2028 traded at 6 cents on the dollar Wednesday, according to Trace data, meaning that they're likely to default. Meanwhile, the 5.875% first lien bonds due 2024 changed hands approximately 76 cents on the dollar, meaning they have more value. During a bankruptcy, ENDO could try to cut a deal with the government agencies, suing the company for its alleged role in the opioid epidemic. Same old story. Hey, Mr. Government, we're bankrupt. We got no money, right? So they end up paying less. That's the path taken by Purdue Pharma and Mallinckrodt PLC. Those companies use court protection to finish working out settlements with groups that accuse them of making the opioid addiction epidemic worse. Now, if I was the CEO, knowing that the government probably has a real bad attitude towards Purdue and Mallinckrodt, I would try to stay in business and try to work with them and try to get settlements with the government close to the percentage that was settled on without going bankrupt, and try to work with the American government. That would probably do very well for ENDO. Instead of going the typical legal case like this, I'm sure the American government realizes that they can get more money from the company if they stay in business. And the company could get so much more goodwill if they stood up and stood their ground and said, we want to solve the problems. ENDO held liable in U.S. Opioid case via default judgment. Now I'm going to click on this so we can read this, because this happened back in February, I believe. Then we'll go back. February 28, 2022, a judge in Tennessee found ENDO International PLC liable in an opioid marketing case by default and is stripping the company of its legal defense in an upcoming trial. In a rare move, the judge entered a so-called default judgment against ENDO on Monday after finding the company intentionally concealed documents from Tennessee municipalities suing over its marketing of its opioid painkillers. The 13 counties want as much as $23 billion from ENDO and other defendants in reimbursement of tax dollars spent fighting the public health crisis. Okay, so that's a major mistake they made. They withheld documents. The court finds the withholding of documents by ENDO was willful, not inadvertent, and part of a long-term pattern of behavior, Young said in his 10-page order. ENDO's bonds were among the biggest decliners in the market for high-yield debt Tuesday, with notes due 2028 falling more than 3 cents on the dollar to 63.375 cents. That was back in February. Default judgments. While default judgments are relatively uncommon in U.S. litigation, ENDO has faced several for failing to hand over files related to the opioid marketing strategies. In April, another Tennessee judge barred the Dublin, Ireland-based opioid maker from defending itself over the document snafu. 5 months later, ENDO paid $35 million to settle the case. Okay, so they came to a settlement there. And governments can be reasonable if they know that they're going to get a check right away. That's my comment. Last year, ENDO avoided a default judgment in New York opioid case over the same information sharing issue by agreeing to pay $50 million to settle the case and make the discovery issue moot. Heather Zomas-Lebesky, an ENDO spokesperson, didn't return an email and a call Monday seeking comment on the latest default judgment against the company. In a statement earlier this month, after hearing before Young, ENDO representatives said that there was no valid basis for sanctioning the firm again over the missing files. Instead of applying the law to the facts before it, the court improperly adopted the findings of a different Tennessee court in a different case, said Matthew Maletta, ENDO's chief legal officer. The Tennessee's counties allege ENDO, along with opioid maker Teva Pharmaceutical Industries and pharmacy chains such as CVS Health Corp. And Walgreens Boots Alliance, mishandled opioid painkillers and created a so-called public nuisance with their lax oversight of highly addictive medicines. You can't say that that's not true. It is true. So many people died. But the doctors had to prescribe them, and the marketing went to the doctors. That's my side note. More than 500,000 Americans have died from overdoses tied to opioid-based drugs over the last 2 decades. State and local governments are seeking to recover billions in tax dollars spent battling the fallout from opioid addictions. States and municipalities have racked up more than $26 billion in settlements so far in the litigation. Young, elected to his post in 2014, explained the basis for his ruling against ENDO in an interview with Law360.com this month. It's the worst case of document hiding that I've ever seen, the judge told the news service. That does not sound good for ENDO. It was like a plot out of the John Grisham movie, except it was even worse than what we could dream up. The case is Clay County versus AmerisourceBergen Drug Corp. Wow, that's heavy duty. I don't know if they're going to get out of this. And with that happening in February 28th, that might really put a nail in the coffin of not going the bankruptcy route. However, the government is now angry with this company. So therefore, there's potential that they better get very political. Now let's go back to the original story. ENDO held liable in U.S. opioid case via default judgment. I just read. Bondholders who in bankruptcy could not be paid until after senior lenders get what they are due. Oppose a Chapter 11 filing, saying it would damage the company's value needlessly. They prefer an out-of-court restructuring. Before filing bankruptcy, Purdue Mallinckrodt negotiated tentative opioid deals with many of the government agencies suing them. Once under court protection, the company worked to win support from holdouts to craft a payout plan acceptable to many creditors as possible. Both cases are in the final stages after having spent millions of dollars in legal and other advisory cases. Now let's read that paragraph again. Before filing bankruptcy, Purdue and Mallinckrodt negotiated tentative opioid deals with many of the government agencies suing them. Once under court protection, the companies worked to win support from holdouts and craft a payment plan acceptable to as many creditors as possible. That was their strategy. Work out a deal with the government, file bankruptcy, screw the investors, which means that they're going to screw the stockholders. Both cases are in the final stages after having spent hundreds of millions of dollars in legal and other advisory fees. ENDO has settled some of the suits it faces, but has not announced the kind of global deal Purdue and Mallinckrodt reached before the Chapter 11 cases. In a regulatory filing, ENDO told investors opioid litigation may cost about $200 million in the second quarter. The opioid epidemic has been blamed for more than 500,000 deaths over 2 decades. Last year, ENDO hired Skadden, Arps, Slate, Megger, and Flom and PJT Partners to help it address opioid liabilities. The company has more than $1.4 billion in unrestricted cash, $640 million in immediate borrowing capacity, which means ENDO may not need to take out expensive loan to fund the cost of bankruptcy. So, folks, it's going to depend on the integrity of the leadership of the company. They are certainly a big company with many drugs. They are in a country that is very sensitive to jobs, and their main business in Ireland, or one of their main businesses, pharmaceuticals. The excitement over Plan B may not even be relative to this stock. I think that this might have been propaganda that was put out to people like you and I, so that we would jump in and buy the stock and get excited and build our own logic in our own little heads that convince us that this is a company that we should be involved in. Certainly, the information was not provided to us on the various stock boards like Yahoo and StockTwitch, where many of us get lots of our information. And certainly, this story from Bloomberg did not come out until it's 11 o'clock, till about 3 hours ago. So we really can't blame ourselves too much, but it seems like we are entangled in this mess. I would say the first thing we should all do is say a prayer for the people that died from this opioid addiction. Say a prayer for the little boys and little girls that lost their parents. Say a prayer for everybody that this epidemic has touched, and just hope that no one we know ever gets caught up in it. Are the drug companies responsible? I think they are. Are the doctors responsible? I think they are. I just go with caution. Try to deal with as much pain as you possibly can, and don't do this stuff. Now, as far as what I'm going to do in the morning, I have to really think about this. I mean, tomorrow's the day that they have their bond payment. If they miss the bond payment, that's going to definitely mean uh, that they're going to try to file for bankruptcy. If we don't see a press release from the company tomorrow, we may see a rise in the stock just for people to try to get more people out. Remember, the volume was 500 million shares the day before yesterday and only 160 million shares today. So this might have been a lot of people getting out of the stock. And, the way life is, I guess, especially people that distribute opioids, they don't really care about people like you and I. So we got some decisions to make. I really would like you to make some comments below this video. Let's work together on ideas of what we should do or what we shouldn't do. I mean, the only thing we can do is buy or sell, right? So evaluating this comes down to the smarts that you have, which are probably much more than the smarts that I have. But I would say this kind of puts the stock on a teeter-totter here. I don't give financial advice. This is just what I'm sharing with you where I am. I told you before that I have 81,000 shares, and that's correct. So good luck to all. God bless, and please do me that favor. Say a prayer for those people, because it's a very, very painful thing to lose a child. Everybody who dies is somebody's child. Good night.